The blood on Francesca Riley's hands would not wash away no matter how hard she scrubbed. And it belonged to the only man she had ever loved until the day he broke her heart by dying in another woman's arms. Colfax, California, had never been kind to women like Francesca. Women who believed in love and loyalty and all those beautiful lies that men whispered in the dark. The year was 1878, and the small mountain town perched along the transcontinental railroad had seen its share of broken dreams, but none quite like hers. She stood at the wash basin in her modest seamstress shop, watching the water turn pink as she cleaned the blood from beneath her fingernails. It was not her blood, nor was it from any violence she had committed. It was simply the result of her former profession, the one she had abandoned 3 years ago when she discovered her fiancé in the arms of a saloon girl. Before that terrible day, Francesca had worked as a nurse, tending to the sick and injured throughout Colfax. She had been good at it, skilled with her hands and gentle with her patients. But the sight of blood now made her stomach turn, reminded her of that awful morning when she had rushed to tend to a man injured in a brawl only to find her beloved Thomas wrapped around another woman, very much alive and uninjured, laughing at some private joke while Francesca's world crumbled around her. The blood today had come from a simple accident. She had pricked her finger while sewing a wedding dress for the mayor's daughter, and the sight of that single red drop had sent her spiraling backward through time. She was 23 now, old enough to know better than to dwell on the past, but young enough that the wound still felt fresh. She dried her hands on a clean cloth and surveyed her shop. Bolts of fabric lined the walls in every color imaginable, shipped in from San Francisco at great expense. Her sewing machine, a beautiful Singer model that had cost her 6 months of savings, sat in pride of place by the window where the light was best. Dresses in various stages of completion hung from hooks and mannequins, evidence of her success in this new profession. Francesca had taught herself to sew in the months after Thomas. She had needed something to occupy her hands, her mind, her shattered heart. The rhythmic motion of the needle through fabric had been meditative, healing in ways she had not expected. Stitch by stitch, she had sewn herself back together, creating a new life from the scraps of the old one. The bell above her door chimed, and Francesca looked up to see Margaret Chen, the owner of the general store, bustling in with a worried expression on her round face. "Francesca, thank goodness you are here," Margaret said, slightly out of breath. "I have torn my best dress, the green one with the ivory buttons, and I need it repaired by tomorrow evening. The railroad is bringing in a group of investors, and my husband insists I look presentable." Francesca smiled despite her melancholy mood. Margaret was one of her best customers and had become a dear friend over the past few years. "Let me see the damage." Margaret produced the dress from her basket, and Francesca examined the torn seam along the side. It was a clean tear, easily mended. "I can have this ready by tomorrow afternoon." "You are a blessing," Margaret said, relief evident in her voice. Then she leaned in conspiratorially. "Have you heard about the cattle drive coming through?" Francesca shook her head as she made notes about the repair in her ledger. "A group of cowboys are bringing a herd up from the valley to the railroad depot. They will be here for at least a week while the cattle are loaded onto the trains. My husband says it will be good for business." Margaret paused, her eyes twinkling. "And I heard the trail boss is quite handsome." "Margaret," Francesca said with a warning tone, but she could not help the small smile that played at her lips. "I am just saying, you cannot mourn Thomas forever. That scoundrel married that saloon girl 6 months after you left him, and now she is pregnant with their second child. You deserve happiness too." The mention of Thomas's growing family stung more than Francesca cared to admit, but she kept her expression neutral. "I am happy. I have my shop, my independence, and I do not need a man to complete my life." "Independence is fine," Margaret said, gathering her basket. "But it does not keep you warm at night." After Margaret left, Francesca tried to focus on her work, but her friend's words echoed in her mind. She had convinced herself that she was content with her solitary life, that she had built something meaningful from the ashes of her broken engagement. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the evening, she felt the weight of her loneliness like a stone in her chest. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the California sun already warming the wooden sidewalks by the time Francesca opened her shop. She could hear the distant lowing of cattle and the shouts of men, and she knew the drive had arrived. Despite her best intentions, she found herself glancing out the window more often than usual, catching glimpses of dust clouds and movement down by the railroad depot. She was pinning the hem on a customer's skirt when the bell above her door chimed again. She looked up, expecting to see one of her regular clients, but instead found herself staring at a tall cowboy with dusty boots and kind eyes the color of sage. "Pardon me, miss," he said, removing his worn hat to reveal dark hair that fell just past his collar. "I am looking for someone who might be able to mend my jacket. The general store owner said you were the best seamstress in town." Francesca straightened, suddenly aware of the loose strand of hair that had escaped her bun and the smudge of chalk on her cheek. "I can certainly take a look at it." He shrugged out of the leather jacket, and she could see the problem immediately. A long tear ran along the shoulder seam, likely from catching on something sharp. But what caught her attention more than the damage was the beautiful craftsmanship of the jacket itself. It was well made, with careful stitching and quality leather that had been oiled and maintained despite obvious years of hard use. "This is good work," she said, running her fingers along the seam. "Where did you get it?" "My mother made it for me," he said, and there was such warmth in his voice that Francesca looked up at him with new interest. "She passed 5 years ago, and it is one of the few things I have left of her." "Then I will take extra care with the repair," Francesca promised. "It will take me a day or two." "That is fine. We will be in town for at least a week." He extended his hand. "I am Kieran Xander. I am the trail boss for the drive that just came in." She shook his hand, noting the calluses and the strength in his grip. "Francesca Riley, welcome to Colfax." "Thank you." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, softening the hard lines earned from years of working outdoors. "This is a beautiful town, very different from the valley." "You are from the Central Valley, near Fresno," he confirmed. "We have been driving these cattle for 3 weeks now. It will be good to sleep in a real bed for a few nights." Francesca found herself curious about this soft-spoken cowboy with his gentle manner and his cherished jacket. "How long have you been working cattle drives?" "Since I was 18, Kieran said. "My father had a small ranch, but he lost it in a drought about 7 years ago. I have been working for other ranchers ever since, saving money to buy my own place someday." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a quiet determination that Francesca found admirable. She had known many men who blamed the world for their misfortunes, but Kieran seemed to accept his circumstances while working to change them. "That is a good dream," she said softly. "What about you?" He asked. "Have you always been a seamstress?" Francesca hesitated, unwilling to share the painful story of her past with a stranger, no matter how kind his eyes. "For the past 3 years. Before that, I worked as a nurse." "That is quite a change. Do you miss it?" The question caught her off guard. Most people simply accepted her current profession without asking about her past. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I liked helping people, but this suits me better now." Kieran nodded as if he understood there was more to the story, but he did not press. "Well, I am grateful for your help with the jacket." "How much do I owe you?" "Come back in 2 days and we will settle up then," Francesca said, making a note in her ledger. After he left, she found herself thinking about him more than she should. There was something different about Kieran Xander, something genuine and solid that appealed to her. But she had learned the hard way that men could not be trusted, that they would break your heart without a second thought. She forced herself to focus on her work, pushing thoughts of the handsome trail boss from her mind. That evening, as she was closing up the shop, Margaret appeared at her door with a knowing look. "So you met him," she said without preamble. "Who?" Francesca asked innocently, though she knew exactly whom Margaret meant. "The trail boss. Kieran Xander. He came into the store asking about a seamstress, and I sent him straight to you." "You are a terrible matchmaker, Margaret." "I am an excellent matchmaker," Margaret corrected. "Did you notice his eyes and those shoulders? He looks like he could lift a horse." Despite herself, Francesca laughed. "He seems like a nice man, that is all I noticed." "Liar," Margaret said affectionately, "but that is fine. You do not have to admit anything to me. Just promise you will not shut yourself off from the possibility of happiness." After Margaret left, Francesca locked the door and climbed the narrow stairs to her small apartment above the shop. It was a cozy space with a bedroom, a sitting area, and a tiny kitchen. She had made it comfortable over the years, filling it with pretty things she had sewn and small treasures she had collected. It was hers, purchased with money she had earned herself, and she was proud of that independence. But as she sat by her window looking out at the street below, she could not help but feel the familiar ache of loneliness. She watched couples stroll arm in arm, families heading home for dinner, children chasing each other in the fading light. Somewhere in this town, Thomas was sitting down to dinner with his wife and children, living the life that should have been hers. No, she thought firmly. She did not want that life anymore. She did not want Thomas. But she did want someone to share her life with. She wanted what she had believed in before he had broken her heart, that foolish romantic notion that love could be real and lasting and true. She spent the next day working on Kieran's jacket, taking extra care with each stitch. The leather was soft and supple beneath her fingers, and she found herself imagining his mother making it, pouring love into every seam. What kind of man treasured a jacket so much? What kind of man spoke of his mother with such gentle reverence 5 years after her death? By the time she finished the repair, the seam was nearly invisible, stronger than it had been before. She hung the jacket carefully, ready for when Kieran returned. He came late the next afternoon, his face tired but pleased. "We got all the cattle into the holding pens today," he said. "They will start loading them onto the train cars tomorrow." Francesca brought out the jacket and his face lit up when he saw it. He examined the repair closely, running his fingers over the seam just as she had done. "This is perfect," he said quietly. "You cannot even tell it was torn." "Thank you. It was my pleasure. Your mother did beautiful work." "She did." He pulled on the jacket, and Francesca noticed how well it fit his broad shoulders, how the leather had molded to his frame over the years. "She made it for my 18th birthday. She said a man needed a good jacket to face the world." She was right, Francesca said, then quoted a price for the repair. Kieran paid without haggling, then hesitated at the door. "Miss Riley, I know this might be forward of me, but would you consider joining me for dinner this evening? There is a restaurant across from the hotel, and I would appreciate the company of someone who is not a dusty cowboy." Francesca's first instinct was to refuse, to protect herself from the possibility of pain. But something about Kieran's earnest expression made her pause. "What harm could one dinner do? I would like that," she heard herself say. His smile was like sunrise. "Wonderful. Shall I call for you at 7? That evening, Francesca found herself taking extra care with her appearance. She chose her best dress, a deep blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and arranged her dark hair in a simple but elegant style. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. She had not dressed up for a man in 3 years, had not allowed herself to care what anyone thought of her appearance beyond basic neatness. Kieran arrived promptly at 7, freshly washed and wearing clean clothes, though Francesca noticed he still wore the repaired jacket. They walked to the restaurant together, and Francesca was aware of the curious glances from her neighbors. Colfax was a small town, and everyone knew everyone's business. By tomorrow, half the town would know she had gone to dinner with the trail boss. The restaurant was simple but clean, and the food was surprisingly good. As they ate, they talked about everything and nothing. Kieran told her about growing up on his father's ranch, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the simple joy of working with cattle and horses. Francesca found herself telling him about her childhood in Sacramento, about her parents who had passed from influenza when she was 16, about her journey to Colfax seeking a fresh start. She did not tell him about Thomas, not yet, but she had a feeling Kieran knew there was a story there. He did not press, just listened with those kind eyes and asked thoughtful questions. "What made you choose Colfax?" he asked as they shared a slice of apple pie for dessert. "It was far enough from Sacramento to feel like a new beginning," Francesca said, "but close enough that I did not feel completely unmoored, and the railroad connection meant there would be work for a nurse. But now you are a seamstress." "Now I am a seamstress," she agreed. Kieran studied her for a long moment. "I think there is more to that story." "There is," Francesca admitted, "but it is not a story for a first dinner." "Does that mean there might be a second dinner?" The hope in his voice made her smile. "Perhaps." As they walked back to her shop, Francesca found herself relaxing in Kieran's presence. He did not fill the silence with meaningless chatter, seemed comfortable with quiet companionship. When they reached her door, he tipped his hat. "Thank you for a lovely evening, Miss Riley." "Francesca," she said. "Please call me Francesca." "Francesca," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. "And you should call me Kieran." "Kieran," she said, testing it out. He smiled. "I would like to see you again before I leave town, if you would allow it." "I would like that too." Over the next few days, Kieran found reasons to visit Francesca's shop. He brought her a button that had come loose from his vest. He asked if she could sew a patch onto his saddle bag. He wondered if she might hem a pair of trousers. Francesca saw through these transparent excuses, but she did not mind. She found herself looking forward to his visits, to the sound of the bell above her door announcing his arrival. They took walks in the evening after she closed the shop, strolling through the streets of Colfax as the sun set behind the mountains. Kieran told her about the places he had been, the drives he had led, the ranch he hoped to own someday. Francesca shared her dreams too, the ones she had buried after Thomas, dreams of a life filled with love and meaning. "Why did you stop being a nurse?" Kieran asked one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the railroad tracks. Francesca had known this question would come eventually. She took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "I was engaged once to a man named Thomas. I loved him desperately, or at least I thought I did. We had planned our whole life together." She paused, the old pain still sharp despite the years. "One morning I received word that a man had been injured in a fight at the saloon. I rushed over with my medical bag, ready to help. But when I got there, Thomas was not injured at all. He was with another woman, a saloon girl. They were laughing together, and when he saw me, he did not even look ashamed." Kieran's jaw tightened. "What did you do?" "I threw my ring at him and walked away," Francesca said. I learned later that they had been carrying on for months while he was courting me, while he was promising me forever. 6 months after I ended our engagement, he married her. They have 2 children now. I am sorry, Kieran said quietly. You deserved better than that. I thought I did too, Francesca said. But mostly, I felt like a fool. I had believed in him so completely, trusted him with my whole heart. After that, I could not work as a nurse anymore. Every time I went to help someone, I remembered that day, the way I had rushed to save him only to have my heart broken instead. So you taught yourself to sew. I needed something to do with my hands, Francesca explained. Something that had nothing to do with Thomas or nursing or any part of that old life. The first things I made were terrible, crooked seams and uneven hems. But gradually, I got better. I found that I liked creating beautiful things, that there was a kind of healing in the repetition of needle and thread. Kieran reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. He was a fool to let you go. He did not let me go, Francesca corrected. I left him. Even better, Kieran said with a slight smile. That takes courage. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Francesca felt something shift inside her, a softening of the protective walls she had built around her heart. Kieran made her want to believe again, to trust that not all men were like Thomas. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Why are you not married? You are what, 26, 27? Most men your age have wives and families by now. 28, Kieran said. And I suppose I have been waiting. For what? He turned to look at her, his sage-colored eyes serious. For the right woman. My parents had a true partnership, a love that lasted until the day my mother died. My father never remarried, said he had already found his soulmate and lightning would not strike twice. I want that kind of love, Francesca. I would rather be alone than settle for anything less. Her heart stuttered in her chest. That is beautiful. It is also impractical, Kieran admitted with a rueful laugh. I have been alone for a long time. So have I, Francesca whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. Maybe we do not have to be any more. The week passed too quickly. The cattle were loaded onto the trains, and Kieran's work in Colfax was nearly done. Francesca found herself dreading his departure, the return to her solitary life. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to the way he made her laugh, to the gentle respect with which he treated her. On his last evening in town, Kieran took her to dinner again, this time at a fancier restaurant in the hotel. Over roasted chicken and potatoes, he was quieter than usual, his expression thoughtful. What is wrong? Francesca asked. Kieran set down his fork and met her eyes. I do not want to leave. Then stay, she said, knowing it was impossible even as she spoke the words. I have responsibilities, he said. The men who work for me, the rancher who hired me to complete this drive, I have to see it through. I know, Francesca said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. But I will come back, Kieran said urgently, leaning forward. As soon as this job is done, I will come back to Colfax, if you will have me. Hope flared in Francesca's chest, bright and fragile. Do you mean that? I have never meant anything more in my life, Kieran said. Francesca, I know we have only known each other for a week. I know it is fast, maybe too fast. But I feel something with you that I have never felt before. You make me want to be better, to work harder, to build that ranch I have been dreaming about so I can offer you a real home. Tears pricked at Francesca's eyes. Kieran, I am scared. I know, he said gently. I know you have been hurt, and I know you are afraid to trust again. But I am not Thomas. I will not break your heart. How can you promise that? Because I am falling in love with you, Kieran said simply. And I think maybe you are falling in love with me too. Francesca could not deny it. Somewhere over the past week, Between the walks and the conversations and the quiet moments of companionship, she had fallen for this gentle cowboy with his kind eyes and his dreams of a better future. "I am," she whispered. "I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me." Kieran stood and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair. "Be brave with me, Francesca. Give us a chance. I will come back, I promise you. And when I do, we will figure out the rest together." She cupped his face in her hands, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "What if you change your mind? What if you get back on the trail and realize this was just a momentary attraction?" "That is not going to happen," Kieran said firmly. "You are not a momentary anything, Francesca Riley. You are the woman I have been waiting for my entire life." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Francesca melted into it, letting herself believe, letting herself hope. When they finally pulled apart, she was crying, but they were good tears, healing tears. "How long will you be gone?" she asked. 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, Kieran said. "We have to get the remaining cattle to Sacramento, then I need to collect my pay and settle some debts. But then I will come straight back here, and we will start planning our future." "Our future," Francesca repeated, testing the words. They felt good, felt right. That night Kieran walked her home and kissed her goodbye at her door. 6 weeks, he promised. "Maybe less if I can manage it." "I will wait for you," Francesca said. "I know you will," Kieran said, his thumb gently wiping away a tear from her cheek. "Because you are brave and strong and loyal. You are everything I never knew I needed." Francesca watched from her window as Kieran walked back to the hotel, committing every detail to memory. Tomorrow he would be gone and she would be alone again. But this time, the loneliness would be different. This time she had hope. The next morning, Francesca woke early to see Kieran off. The cowboys were gathering their horses and supplies, preparing for the long journey ahead. Kieran spotted her in the crowd and broke away, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I will write," he promised. "Every town we pass through that has a post office, I will send you a letter." "I will write back," Francesca said, breathing in the scent of leather and sage that clung to him. 6 weeks, he said again, pulling back to look at her face. "Maybe less. I will count every day." He kissed her one more time, then mounted his horse. Francesca watched as the group of cowboys rode out of town, Kieran turning back to wave until he disappeared around the bend. Only then did she let herself cry, mourning the end of their perfect week, even as she held onto the promise of his return. The days that followed were difficult. Francesca threw herself into her work, taking on more projects than she could reasonably handle just to keep her mind occupied. Margaret visited often, bringing news and gossip and encouragement. "He will come back," Margaret said one afternoon as they shared tea in Francesca's shop. "I saw the way he looked at you. That man is smitten." "I hope you are right," Francesca said, though doubt crept in during the long, lonely nights. What if Kieran realized he had made a mistake? What if he met someone else on the trail? What if he never came back? But then, 2 weeks after he left, a letter arrived. Francesca's hands shook as she opened it, her eyes devouring every word. "My dearest Francesca," Kieran had written in surprisingly elegant script. "We have made good time on the trail and the cattle are healthy. But all I can think about is you. I dream of your smile, your laugh, the way your eyes light up when you talk about your work. I count the days until I can hold you in my arms again. The drive has been uneventful so far, though we did lose 2 steers to a mountain lion. The men are in good spirits, and we should reach Sacramento ahead of schedule. That means I will be back in Colfax sooner than expected. I am saving every penny of my wages, planning for our future. I have been thinking about what kind of ranch I want to build, and I realize that none of it matters if you are not there to share it with me. You have become essential to me, Francesca, as necessary as air and water. I will see you soon, my love. Yours always, Kieran. Francesca read the letter a dozen times, committing every word to memory. She wrote back immediately, telling him about her work, about the new dress she was making for the banker's wife, about how much she missed him. She poured her heart onto the page, all the feelings she had been too afraid to voice when he was standing in front of her. More letters followed over the next weeks, each one deepening their connection. Kieran wrote about his dreams and fears, about his childhood and his hopes for the future. Francesca shared her own stories, her own dreams. She told him about the parents she had lost, about the years she had spent feeling adrift before finding her purpose in sewing. In one letter, she wrote, "You asked me once why I stopped being a nurse, and I told you about Thomas. But that is only part of the truth. I stopped because I had lost faith in my ability to heal, to help. I felt like I had failed, like my judgment was so poor I could not trust myself to make life and death decisions anymore. But you are helping me see that one mistake, one betrayal, does not define my whole life. You are showing me that I can trust again, that my heart is stronger than I thought." His response came quickly. "My darling Francesca, you did not fail. The man who betrayed you failed. You are one of the strongest, most capable women I have ever met. I see it in everything you do, the care you take with your work, the kindness you show to everyone you meet. You healed yourself when no one else could, stitched your broken heart back together with the same skill you use to create beautiful things. That takes a strength most people do not have. I am in awe of you." Reading those words, Francesca felt something fundamental shift inside her. She had spent 3 years believing she was broken, that Thomas had damaged something essential in her. But Kieran saw her differently. He saw her strength, her resilience, her capacity for healing. He saw the woman she had become rather than the woman she used to be. 5 weeks after Kieran left, Francesca received another letter. This one was shorter, more urgent. The drive was complete, he wrote. He had been paid and had settled his debts. He would be in Colfax within the week. Francesca's heart soared. She cleaned her shop from top to bottom, made sure her apartment was spotless, and carefully selected her best dress to wear. She tried not to watch the road too obviously, but every time she heard horses, her eyes flew to the window. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, dusty and travel-worn but smiling. Francesca saw him through the window and flew out the door, not caring who saw her, not caring about propriety or dignity. She ran into his arms and he caught her, lifting her off her feet as he spun her around. "You came back," she said, half laughing, half crying. "I promised I would," Kieran said, setting her down but not letting go. "And I am not going anywhere ever again." He kissed her right there in the middle of the street, and Francesca did not care that the whole town was probably watching. She had found something precious, something worth fighting for, and she was not going to hide it. That evening, after she closed the shop, they walked up to the ridge overlooking town. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Francesca felt more at peace than she had in years. "I have been thinking," Kieran said as they sat on a flat rock, his arm around her shoulders, "about everything. About you, about us, about the future." And Francesca prompted when he paused. "I want to buy land near here," Kieran said. "There is a parcel about 5 miles outside of town, good grazing land with a creek running through it. It is not much, but it is a start. I can build a small ranch, raise cattle and horses. It is what I have always wanted to do." "That sounds wonderful," Francesca said, happiness bubbling up inside her. "But I do not want to do it alone," Kieran continued. He shifted, turning to face her fully. "Francesca Riley, I know we have only known each other for a short time. But in that time, You have become the most important person in my world. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you have rebuilt your life from nothing. I love how you make me want to be better. I love everything about you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's wedding ring. My father gave it to me before he died, told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with. Francesca, will you marry me? Will you build this life with me, create something beautiful together?" Francesca's vision blurred with tears. This was nothing like her engagement to Thomas, with his grand gestures and empty promises. This was real and honest and true. Kieran was offering her everything she had ever wanted, everything she thought she had lost. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Kieran slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. He kissed her again, tender and reverent, and Francesca felt the last pieces of her broken heart click back into place. She had sewn herself back together over the past 3 years, but Kieran had helped her finish the work, his love the final stitches that made her whole. They married a month later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Colfax. Margaret stood up as Francesca's witness, tears streaming down her face, while one of Kieran's fellow cowboys served as his. Francesca wore a dress she had made herself, ivory silk with delicate embroidery, and Kieran wore his mother's jacket, the repaired seam a reminder of how they had met. The whole town turned out for the celebration afterward, even people Francesca barely knew. Everyone wanted to congratulate the seamstress who had found love with the cowboy. Some of the older women clucked their tongues about the speed of the courtship, but Francesca did not care. When you found the right person, you knew. After the wedding, they moved into Francesca's apartment temporarily while Kieran began work on their ranch. He had purchased the land he had mentioned, a beautiful stretch of California hillside with a creek and plenty of good grass. Every morning, he rode out to work on the house, felling trees and shaping lumber with his own hands. Francesca helped in the evenings after she closed her shop, holding boards steady while he nailed them in place, offering suggestions on the layout. "I want a big kitchen," she said one evening as they surveyed the framed-out structure, "with lots of windows for light." "You shall have it," Kieran promised, "and a separate room for your sewing with the best light in the house. You would do that for me." "Francesca, I would give you the moon if I could reach it," Kieran said seriously. "Your work is important. I would never ask you to give it up." She kissed him, overwhelmed by his understanding. Thomas had always dismissed her interests, belittled her ambitions. But Kieran celebrated them, encouraged them. The house took shape slowly but surely. Kieran was meticulous in his work, taking care to build something that would last. Other ranchers in the area stopped by to help, and Francesca was touched by their generosity. This was what community meant, people coming together to support each other. By early spring of 1879, the house was finished. It was not grand, but it was solid and beautiful, with wide windows and a stone fireplace and all the love that had gone into building it. Francesca stood in her new sewing room, looking out at the rolling hills, and felt a profound sense of belonging. "What do you think?" Kieran asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "It is perfect," Francesca said honestly. "It is everything I never knew I wanted." They moved in the next week, transferring Francesca's belongings from the apartment above the shop. She kept the shop itself, hiring a young woman named Sarah to help manage it during the days when Francesca needed to be at the ranch. It was a good arrangement, allowing Francesca to continue her work while also building her new life with Kieran. The ranch started small, with just a dozen head of cattle and a few horses. But Kieran had a gift for working with animals, a patience and intuition that the creatures responded to. He spent long days in the saddle, mending fences and checking water sources and tending to his small herd. Francesca loved watching him work, the easy grace with which he moved, the gentle care he showed even the most stubborn steer. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch the sunset, talking about their day, making plans for the future. Francesca had never been happier. The fears that had plagued her after Thomas faded away, replaced by a deep certainty that she had found her person, her home. One evening, about 6 months after they moved to the ranch, Francesca realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another week to be sure, then confirmed her suspicions. She was pregnant. She told Kieran that night at dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. His face went through a series of emotions, surprise and joy and wonder, before he jumped up and pulled her into his arms. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are," Francesca confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. "I am going to be a father," Kieran said, as if testing the words. "We are going to be parents." That night, they lay in bed talking about the future, about names and nursery decorations and all the adventures their child would have growing up on the ranch. Kieran placed his hand on Francesca's still flat stomach, his expression full of awe. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For trusting me with your heart," Kieran said. "For taking a chance on us. For giving me this life, this future. I know it was not easy for you after what you went through." Francesca covered his hand with hers. "You made it easy. You showed me that love could be gentle and true. You stitched my broken heart together, Kieran. You made me whole again." "We made each other whole," Kieran corrected. "I was lost before I met you, just drifting from job to job, never really belonging anywhere. But with you, I have found my home." The pregnancy was not easy. Francesca struggled with sickness in the early months, and as she grew larger, the simple tasks of daily life became more challenging. But Kieran was there every step of the way, taking over her heavier chores, bringing her tea when she felt ill, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings. Margaret visited often, bringing food and advice and her own special brand of no-nonsense encouragement. "You are doing beautifully," she would say, even when Francesca felt enormous and uncomfortable. "Just wait, it will all be worth it." As her due date approached, Francesca felt her old nursing knowledge returning. She knew the signs of labor, the stages of birth, the potential complications. She tried not to worry, but sometimes fear crept in during the dark hours of the night. What if something went wrong? What if she lost the baby? What if she was not strong enough? Kieran always seemed to know when she was spiraling into fear. He would hold her close, his hand on her belly, and whisper reassurances. "You are the strongest person I know," he would say. "Our baby is lucky to have you as a mother." The baby came on a cold January morning in 1880 after 12 hours of hard labor. The midwife from town attended along with Margaret, but it was Kieran who stayed by Francesca's side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, encouraging her through each contraction. When their son finally emerged, red-faced and squalling, Francesca burst into tears of relief and joy. Kieran cut the cord with shaking hands, then held their baby for the first time, his eyes wet with emotion. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Francesca, he is absolutely perfect." They named him James, after Kieran's father, and he was indeed perfect. He had Kieran's dark hair and Francesca's blue eyes, and from the first moment, he had both of them wrapped around his tiny fingers. Francesca slipped back into her old nursing skills as naturally as breathing, caring for James with a confidence she had not known she possessed. All those years of training had not been wasted after all. She had just been waiting for the right patient, the right reason to use her knowledge. "You are a natural," Kieran said one night as he watched her feed their son. Look at you. Everything you thought you had lost is still there. You did not need to give up being a healer. You just needed to heal yourself first." His words struck deep, and Francesca realized he was right. She had not lost her ability to care for others when Thomas betrayed her. She had just lost her faith in herself. But now, with Kieran's love and support, with the evidence of her own strength right there in her arms, that faith had returned. Over the next few years, the ranch prospered. Kieran's herd grew, his reputation as an honest and skilled rancher spreading throughout the region. Francesca continued her seamstress work, balancing her business with raising James. It was a full life, sometimes exhausting but always rewarding. James was a happy child, curious and adventurous. As soon as he could walk, he followed Kieran everywhere, tottering after his father on unsteady legs, determined to help with the ranch work. Kieran was patient with him, teaching him about animals and the land, passing on the knowledge his own father had given him. When James was 3, Francesca realized she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1883, a tiny thing with blonde hair and sage-colored eyes exactly like her father's. They named her Elizabeth, after Francesca's mother, and she was as different from James as night from day. Where he was adventurous and bold, she was thoughtful and gentle. She loved sitting in Francesca's sewing room, watching her mother work, and by the time she was 5, she was learning to make her own stitches. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to grow, Kieran hiring a couple of ranch hands to help with the increased workload. Francesca's shop in town thrived, her reputation for quality work drawing customers from neighboring towns. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. One evening, when James was 7 and Elizabeth 4, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together at the end of the day. James was telling an elaborate story about a lizard he had seen, while Elizabeth played with a cloth doll Francesca had made her. Kieran reached over and took Francesca's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Do you remember the first time we sat and watched the sunset together?" he asked. "On the ridge overlooking town," Francesca said. "The night you proposed." "I was so nervous," Kieran admitted. "I was afraid you would say no, that you would think I was moving too fast." "I almost did say no," Francesca confessed. "I was so scared of being hurt again. But you were brave." "We both were," Francesca said. She looked at their children, at their home, at the life they had built together. "Kieran, do you remember what I said to you once, about how you stitched my broken heart together?" "I remember." "I was wrong," Francesca said. "You did not stitch my heart together. You helped me remember how to do it myself. You gave me the courage and the love I needed to heal, and in the process, we created something even more beautiful than what I had before." Kieran lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I love you, Francesca Xander." "More with each passing day." "And I love you," Francesca replied. "More than I ever thought possible." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Francesca felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about the young woman she had been, the heartbroken nurse who had run away from her pain and reinvented herself as a seamstress. She thought about the broken pieces of her life, the way she had carefully stitched them back together into something new. But the real magic had not been in the mending. It had been in the courage to open her heart again, to risk the pain of loss for the possibility of love. Kieran had given her that courage, shown her that not all love ended in betrayal. And together, they had built something lasting and true. The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. James grew into a capable young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch and showing his father's gift with animals. Elizabeth developed her mother's talent for sewing, creating beautiful pieces that Francesca proudly displayed in the shop. When James was 12 and Elizabeth 9, they welcomed another son, William, who proved to be a perfect blend of his siblings' best qualities. The ranch expanded over the years, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Kieran developed a reputation not just as a skilled cattleman, but as a fair employer and a pillar of the community. He never forgot where he had come from, often hiring young men who reminded him of himself at that age, giving them the opportunity he had once needed. Francesca's shop became an institution in Colfax. She trained several young women in the art of sewing, passing on her skills just as she had learned them. But she never forgot that sewing had been her salvation, the thing that had saved her when she thought she was beyond saving. Sometimes, when she was working on a particularly difficult repair, she would think about that day Kieran had walked into her shop with his mother's jacket. She would remember the careful way she had mended that seam, the love she had poured into making it strong again. She had not known then that she was not just repairing a jacket, but beginning to repair her own heart. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kieran surprised her with a trip back to the ridge where he had proposed. They left the children with Margaret and rode up just as the sun was setting. "Do you ever regret it?" Kieran asked as they sat on the same flat rock where he had asked her to marry him. "Giving up your quiet, independent life for the chaos of marriage and children and ranch life," Francesca laughed. "Not for a single moment. Do you regret asking me?" "Never," Kieran said firmly. "You are the best decision I ever made, Francesca. Everything good in my life stems from that moment when I walked into your shop with a torn jacket. And everything good in mine stems from the moment I decided to trust again," Francesca said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the familiar play of light across the hills. "I used to think Thomas broke something in me that could never be fixed, but he did not. He just showed me that I was stronger than I knew, that I could survive heartbreak and come out the other side." "You did more than survive," Kieran said. "You thrived. You built a whole new life for yourself." "We built it together," Francesca corrected. "I was surviving, but I was not really living until I met you. You taught me the difference." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared and the stars began to emerge. After a while, Kieran spoke again. "I have been thinking about expanding the ranch," he said. "There is a piece of land adjacent to ours that is coming up for sale. If we bought it, we could double our herd, maybe even hire more hands and turn this into something we could pass down to the children." "That sounds wonderful," Francesca said. "James would love to take over the ranch someday." "And Elizabeth could have her own shop in town when she is ready," Kieran added. "She has your gift, Francesca. The way she sees patterns, understands how things fit together. She is going to be an excellent seamstress." "And William?" Francesca asked with a smile. "What do you see for our youngest?" "I think William is going to surprise us all," Kieran said. "He has his own path to walk. We just need to support him in finding it." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming dreams just as they had done from the very beginning. The foundation they had built was strong enough to support whatever the future held. As the years passed, those dreams became reality. They expanded the ranch, bought the adjacent land, and built a legacy for their children. James did indeed take over much of the ranch operations as he got older, showing a natural talent for business as well as cattle. Elizabeth opened a small dressmaking shop in town when she turned 18, working alongside her mother and quickly developing her own clientele. William, as Kieran had predicted, found his own unique path. He showed an early aptitude for reading and writing, and with Francesca's encouragement, he studied to become a teacher. He eventually took a position at the school in Colfax, bringing education to children throughout the region. Through it all, Francesca and Kieran remained each other's anchor. They faced challenges together, celebrated victories together, and held each other through losses. When Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72, they mourned together, remembering the friend who had pushed them toward each other. When the ranch survived a brutal winter that killed half their herd, they worked side by side to rebuild, never losing faith in their ability to overcome. On their 20th anniversary, surrounded by their grown children and their first grandchild, James's infant daughter, Kieran stood to make a toast. 20 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite the silver threading through his hair. I walked into a seamstress shop with a torn jacket and walked out with my heart full. I met a woman who had been broken and had put herself back together with needle and thread and sheer determination. She was the strongest, most courageous person I had ever met, and she still is. He looked at Francesca, his sage eyes still as kind as they had been that first day. Francesca, you have given me everything I never dared to dream of. A home, a family, a purpose. You have been my partner in every sense of the word, building this life with me stitch by stitch. I love you more today than I did 20 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Francesca stood, tears streaming down her face, and kissed her husband. And I love you, she said, for showing me that love does not have to hurt, that it can heal instead of break, for being patient with my fears and celebrating my strengths, for being the man I never knew I was looking for. Their children applauded, and little granddaughter Rose gurgled happily in her father's arms, and Francesca felt the weight of all those years of happiness, all those moments of joy and sorrow and growth. She thought about the young woman she had been, standing at a wash basin trying to scrub away the blood and the memories. She thought about how she had taught herself to sew, creating a new identity from the scraps of her old life. She thought about the day Kieran had walked through her door, bringing with him the possibility of hope, and she thought about what she had told him all those years ago, about how he had stitched her broken heart together. It was true in a way, but it was also more complicated than that. She had stitched her own heart together, had found the strength within herself to heal. But Kieran had given her the courage to use that heart again, to risk it on love one more time. Together, they had created something beautiful. Not perfect, because life was never perfect, but real and true and lasting. They had built a family, a home, a legacy. They had turned pain into purpose, loneliness into love. As the celebration continued around them, Kieran pulled Francesca aside. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand. He led her to the room she used for sewing, the one he had built for her in their house all those years ago. On the table was a carefully wrapped package. "What is this?" Francesca asked. "Open it," Kieran said with a mysterious smile. Inside was his mother's jacket, the one Francesca had repaired when they first met. But it was different now. The leather had been carefully cleaned and conditioned, restored to its original beauty. And on the inside, embroidered in Francesca's own distinctive style, was a message. "To my husband, my love, my home. You walked into my shop with a torn jacket and a kind heart, and you changed my life forever. This repair was the first stitch in the tapestry of our life together. May we continue weaving that tapestry for many years to come. With all my love, Francesca." Kieran read the message, his eyes glistening. "When did you do this?" "I have been working on it for months," Francesca admitted. "I wanted to give you something meaningful for our anniversary. This jacket brought us together. It seems fitting to honor that." Kieran put on the jacket, and Francesca saw the young cowboy he had been, standing in her shop asking for help. But she also saw the man he had become, the father and husband and rancher who had built an empire through hard work and integrity. "It still fits," he said with a laugh. "Some things are timeless," Francesca said, wrapping her arms around him. "Like this jacket, like our love." They stood there in the sewing room holding each other, surrounded by the evidence of Francesca's craft. Bolts of fabric, spools of thread, half-finished projects waiting to be completed. Each stitch a small act of creation, each repair a small act of healing. Francesca had learned long ago that broken things could be mended, that tears could be sewn shut, that holes could be patched. She had learned it first with fabric, practicing the skills that would eventually save her. But the real lesson had come when she applied those same principles to her heart. She had been torn, shredded by betrayal and loss. But she had picked up the pieces and sewn them back together, not perfectly, but strongly. The scars were still there, would always be there, but they were part of her story now. They reminded her of where she had been and how far she had come. And when Kieran had appeared in her life, she had been strong enough to let him in. She had been brave enough to risk her carefully mended heart on the possibility of love. It had been terrifying and exhilarating, and ultimately, it had been worth it. Now, standing in her sewing room with her husband's arms around her, Francesca understood the truth. Love was not about finding someone to fix you. It was about finding someone who saw your broken places and loved you anyway. It was about finding someone who believed in your strength, even when you doubted it yourself. Kieran had not stitched her broken heart together, but he had held her steady while she did the work herself. He had been the thread that reinforced her repairs, the steady hand that guided her needle. Together, they had created something stronger than either of them could have built alone. The celebration continued late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. Francesca danced with her husband, her children, her grandchild, feeling blessed beyond measure. She caught Elizabeth watching her with thoughtful eyes and pulled her daughter aside. "What is it, sweetheart?" she asked. "I was just thinking," Elizabeth said, "about how brave you were, to start over after your heart was broken, to build a new life from nothing." Francesca smiled. "I did not feel brave at the time. I felt lost and scared and alone. But you did it anyway," Elizabeth said. "That is what bravery is, right? Doing the hard thing even when you are afraid." "Yes," Francesca agreed. "And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open your heart again after it has been broken." "Is that what you did with Papa?" "It is," Francesca said. "I was so scared of being hurt again. But he showed me that not all love ends in pain. Some love lasts forever." Elizabeth hugged her mother tightly. "I hope I find that kind of love someday." "You will," Francesca promised. "Just remember to be brave. Do not let fear keep you from the possibility of happiness." As the night drew to a close and the guests began to depart, Francesca and Kieran stood on their porch watching the stars. It had become their ritual over the years, this quiet moment at the end of the day when they could simply be together. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Everything," Francesca said. "The past, the present, the future. How everything led us here." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not torn my jacket that day?" Kieran asked. "If I had never walked into your shop?" "Sometimes," Francesca admitted. "But I think we would have found each other eventually. Some things are meant to be, like us, like us." Francesca agreed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. After a while, Francesca spoke again. "Kieran, do you remember what you said to me that day on the ridge? When you proposed?" "I said a lot of things," Kieran said with a smile. "I was nervous and babbling. You said I had sewn myself back together, that it took strength most people did not have." "I remember," Kieran said. "And it is true, you did. But I could not have done it alone," Francesca said. I needed you, your love and support and belief in me. You showed me that I was stronger than I thought. You gave me the courage to trust again." "We healed each other," Kieran said simply. "That is what love does. It makes us stronger, braver, better than we could be alone." Francesca leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. This was home, she thought. Not the house or the ranch or the town, but this. Being with Kieran, building a life together, facing whatever came side by side. "I want to grow old with you," she said softly. "I want to watch our grandchildren grow up, maybe even meet our great-grandchildren. I want to sit on this porch when we are 80 and watch the sunset and remember everything we have been through together." "That sounds perfect," Kieran said. "And we will. We have built something that will last, Francesca. Not just the ranch or the businesses, but this." He gestured between them. "This love, this partnership. It is our greatest legacy." The years that followed proved Kieran right. Their love remained strong through joys and sorrows, triumphs and setbacks. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses. Through it all, they held fast to each other, their bond growing deeper with each passing year. They did grow old together, just as Francesca had hoped. Their hair turned silver, their bodies grew slower, but their love never dimmed. They watched their children marry and have children of their own. James took over the ranch completely, running it with the same integrity his father had shown. Elizabeth's dress shop became renowned throughout the region, her designs sought after by women from San Francisco to Sacramento. William became a respected educator, shaping the minds of a new generation. And through it all, Francesca continued to sew. Even when her eyes grew weak and her fingers stiff with age, she found comfort in the familiar motion of needle through fabric. She made christening gowns for her grandchildren, wedding dresses for her granddaughters, quilts that would be passed down through generations. Each stitch was a meditation, a reminder of the journey she had taken. She thought about the young woman she had been, broken and lost, and the woman she had become, strong and loved and whole. The transformation had not happened overnight. It had been a gradual process, stitch by stitch, day by day, building something new from the broken pieces of the old. On their 50th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled every corner of the house that Kieran had built with his own hands. The walls echoed with laughter and music and the sounds of life. Kieran, now 78 years old but still strong, stood to make a toast. His hand shook slightly as he raised his glass, but his voice was firm. 50 years ago, I married the love of my life," he said. "I was a simple cowboy with nothing but dreams and determination. She was a seamstress who had rebuilt her life from the ground up. Together, we created all of this." He gestured around the room at their descendants, their legacy. "But more than that, we created a love story that has sustained us through everything life threw at us." He looked at Francesca, and the love in his eyes was as bright as it had been that first day in her shop. "Francesca, you are and always will be the best part of me. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for being brave enough to love again. Thank you for this life." Francesca stood, her own eyes misty. "Thank you for showing me what real love looks like, for teaching me that broken hearts can heal, that they can love even more deeply for having been broken. You stitched my broken heart together, Kieran, not with thread but with patience and kindness and unwavering devotion. And in doing so, you gave me back my faith in love, in life, in myself." The room erupted in applause, and their children and grandchildren crowded around, offering hugs and congratulations. Little great-granddaughter Sarah, just learning to talk, climbed into Francesca's lap and patted her face with chubby hands. Great-grandma happy, she said seriously. Yes, sweetheart, Francesca said, kissing the top of her head. Great-grandma is very happy. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Francesca and Kieran sat on their porch one more time. They were wrapped in blankets against the chill, their hands clasped together, watching the familiar stars. 50 years, Kieran marveled. It feels like both a lifetime and the blink of an eye. I know what you mean, Francesca said. Sometimes I can still see that young cowboy walking into my shop, nervous and hopeful. And sometimes I look at you and see all the years written on your face, all the life we have lived together. Do you have any regrets? Kieran asked. Francesca thought about the question seriously. She thought about Thomas and the pain he had caused, about the years she had spent rebuilding herself, about the fears she had overcome to love Kieran. No, she said finally. Even the painful parts led me here to this life. I would not change a single thing. Neither would I, Kieran agreed. They sat in peaceful silence, two old people who had spent a lifetime together and still found comfort in each other's presence. The ranch spread out around them, dark and quiet, a testament to their years of hard work. Inside the house, generations of families slept under the roof Kieran had built, protected by the love he and Francesca had created. As Francesca drifted off to sleep that night, Kieran's hand still clasped in hers. She thought about all the things that had brought her to this moment. A broken engagement, a torn jacket, a brave choice to trust again. Small moments that had seemed insignificant at the time but had changed the course of her entire life. She had been a seamstress, yes, but she had sewn more than just fabric. She had sewn together the broken pieces of her heart, creating something stronger and more beautiful than before. She had sewn together a life with Kieran, their individual threads combining to create a tapestry of love and family and enduring commitment. And in the end, that was the truth she had discovered. Healing was not about erasing the scars or pretending the breaks had never happened. It was about acknowledging the damage and choosing to repair it, to make something new and strong from the broken pieces. It was about having the courage to love again, to trust again, to believe that happiness was possible even after heartbreak. Kieran had not fixed her because she had not been broken in any way that mattered. She had been hurt, yes, but not destroyed. And his love had not repaired her so much as it had reminded her of her own strength, her own capacity for healing, her own worthiness of love. Together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone. Their children would inherit the ranch and the businesses, but more importantly, they would inherit the example of what true partnership looked like. They would know that love was not about grand gestures or perfect romance, but about showing up every day, choosing each other again and again, working together to build something meaningful. The years continued to pass, and Francesca and Kieran grew older still. Their bodies slowed, their memories sometimes faltered, but their love remained constant. They were fixtures in Colfax, the elderly couple who had built an empire from nothing, who had loved each other faithfully for more than half a century. Francesca continued to sew almost until the very end, her gnarled fingers still able to create beauty from fabric. She taught her great-granddaughters the craft, passing on not just the technical skills but the philosophy behind them. Every repair makes the fabric stronger, she would tell them. Every patch adds character. Do not be afraid of the broken things. They can be beautiful too. When Francesca was 81, her health began to fail. Kieran, now 86, refused to leave her side. He sat by her bed for hours, holding her hand, telling her stories of their life together, reminding her of all the love they had shared. On a quiet spring morning, with the sun streaming through the window of the bedroom they had shared for more than 50 years, Francesca woke to find Kieran watching her with those same kind sage eyes that had captured her heart so long ago. "Good morning, my love," he said softly. "Good morning," Francesca replied, her voice weak but her smile bright. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Francesca admitted, "but happy, so very happy." Kieran lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I love you, Francesca Xander. I have loved you from the moment I walked into your shop with a torn jacket and a hopeful heart." "And I have loved you," Francesca said. "You gave me back my faith in love, in life, in myself. You showed me that broken hearts can heal, that they can love even more deeply for having been broken." "We healed each other," Kieran said, echoing the words he had spoken so many years ago. Francesca squeezed his hand as tightly as she could manage. "Take care of our family," she whispered. "Tell them I love them. Tell them to be brave, to choose love even when it is scary." "I will," Kieran promised, tears streaming down his weathered face. Francesca closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, the comfort of Kieran's hand in hers. She thought about the life she had lived, the love she had found, the family she had created. She had no regrets, no unfinished business. She had lived fully, loved deeply, and created something beautiful that would endure long after she was gone. She passed peacefully that afternoon, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, with Kieran holding her hand. The whole town mourned the loss of the woman who had been a fixture in their community for more than 60 years. The seamstress who had rebuilt her life from nothing, who had created beauty from broken pieces, who had shown them all what true strength looked like. Kieran lived for 3 more years after Francesca passed. He stayed active, working the ranch alongside James, playing with his great-great-grandchildren, keeping his promise to take care of their family. But everyone could see that a light had gone out of him, that he was simply marking time until he could be with Francesca again. He spent hours in the sewing room that had been hers, surrounded by her fabric and thread and unfinished projects. He wore his mother's jacket, the one Francesca had repaired and restored, feeling close to both the women who had shaped his life. And every evening he sat on the porch and watched the sunset, remembering all the times he and Francesca had done the same thing, talking about their day, planning their future, simply being together. When Kieran passed quietly in his sleep at the age of 89, the family buried him next to Francesca in the cemetery, overlooking the ranch they had built together. On the headstone, James had inscribed the words his mother had spoken so many times over the years. "You stitched my broken heart together." The ranch continued under James's capable management, and Elizabeth's dress shop was eventually taken over by her daughter. William's students became teachers themselves, spreading his influence far beyond Colfax. The legacy that Francesca and Kieran had built lived on through their descendants, each generation adding their own stitches to the tapestry. Years later, when great-great-granddaughter Sarah was getting married, she found an old journal in the attic of the ranch house. It was Francesca's, filled with her thoughts and observations from over the years. Sarah sat in the dusty attic, reading her great-great-grandmother's words, feeling connected across the decades to this remarkable woman she had barely known. One entry, dated on Francesca and Kieran's 20th anniversary, caught her attention. "Today I told Kieran that he stitched my broken heart together, but the truth is more complicated. I stitched myself back together after Thomas broke me. I learned to be whole on my own. But Kieran gave me the courage to use that heart again, to risk it on love one more time. He showed me that I was stronger than I thought, that my capacity for love had not been destroyed, just wounded. Together, we created something more beautiful than I ever imagined possible. If I have learned anything from this life, it is that broken things can be mended, that scars can be beautiful, and that the bravest thing you can do is choose love even after love has hurt you. Sarah closed the journal with tears in her eyes. She understood now why her family spoke of Francesca and Kieran with such reverence, why their love story had become legendary. It was not because it was perfect or easy, but because it was real. Because they had chosen each other every day, through good times and bad, building something that lasted. On her wedding day, Sarah wore a dress that incorporated fabric from one of Francesca's old projects, carefully preserved over the years. As she walked down the aisle toward her future husband, she felt the presence of her great-great-grandparents, their love a blessing that stretched across generations. The ranch still stood, strong and prosperous, a testament to Kieran's vision and hard work. The dress shop in town still bore Francesca's name, honoring the woman who had turned her pain into purpose. And in homes throughout the region, quilts and dresses and christening gowns that Francesca had made were treasured as family heirlooms, each stitch a reminder of her skill and her love. But perhaps the greatest legacy Francesca and Kieran left was not in things but in the story they had lived. A story of heartbreak and healing, of courage and love, of two broken people who found each other and created something whole. A story that reminded everyone who heard it that the past does not have to define the future, that broken hearts can heal, and that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a simple act of faith. In Colfax, on quiet evenings when the sun sets behind the mountains, old-timers still tell the story of the seamstress and the cowboy. They speak of Francesca, who arrived in town with a broken heart and built a new life with needle and thread. They speak of Kieran, who walked into her shop one day with a torn jacket and walked out having found his future. They speak of a love that lasted more than 50 years, that survived every challenge life threw at it, that created a legacy that endures to this day. And in telling that story, they remind themselves and the younger generation that love is worth the risk, that healing is possible, and that broken things, when carefully mended, can be even stronger and more beautiful than before. The story of Francesca and Kieran Xander became more than just family history. It became a part of Colfax itself, woven into the fabric of the town as surely as Francesca had woven her threads into her creations. Young women facing heartbreak would remember the seamstress who rebuilt her life from nothing. Young men looking for love would remember the cowboy who saw past the scars to the strength beneath. Couples facing difficulties would remember the partnership that lasted 50 years, built on mutual respect and unwavering commitment. In the end, that was the true magic of their love story. Not that it was perfect or easy, but that it was real and honest and enduring. Francesca had been broken, yes, but she had put herself back together stronger than before. And when Kieran came into her life, she had been brave enough to risk her carefully mended heart on the possibility of happiness. Together, they proved that broken hearts could love again, that past pain did not have to prevent future joy, and that sometimes the most beautiful things in life came from taking a chance on love, even when you were afraid. Their story was one of healing and hope, of courage and commitment, of two people who chose each other and kept choosing each other for the rest of their lives. And that love, stitched together from broken pieces and strengthened by years of devotion, proved to be strong enough to last not just a lifetime, but for generations to come. It was a legacy more precious than gold, more enduring than stone, a reminder that love, true love, could overcome anything. The seamstress had fallen for the cattle-driving cowboy, and in doing so had found not just love but redemption, not just a partner but a home, not just healing but wholeness. And he had found in her everything he had been searching for, a woman of strength and grace who saw him not as a simple cowboy, but as the man he could become. Together, they had stitched their broken hearts together, creating something beautiful and lasting that would echo through the ages, a love story for the ages, a testament to the enduring power of faith, hope, and above all, love.